Okay, hello everybody. Good morning. Welcome to IAB Open at IETF 124 here in Montreal. Thank you for being here, and we're going to get started. So, this is a meeting to have the IAB communicate with the community, share some of what we've been working on, get feedback, etc. But like all the meetings of the IETF, this is covered by the Note Well. This is the updated Note Well text. Please make sure you're familiar with it. We have all the same policies, but this is trying to make sure we understand as a community all the different terms under which we participate here. Our professional interactions, anti-harassment, our policies around how to make contributions, our processes, and the fact that what we are doing here is being recorded, and make sure you're familiar with the privacy statements. Okay, so what is IAB Open? Why are you here? So this is a session where the IAB, which is the Internet Architecture Board, which is a group of 12 people from the community, we can share with the community what's been going on, what we've been hearing about, what are the interesting things that you should know about, and also to get feedback from you. This is where we can talk about relationships with other standards organizations, and we like going through and highlighting different ones each time. We'll have an interesting talk today about Etsy. And the goal here is to increase the visibility of the work and also to hear back from you as the community. Besides IAB Open, you can engage with IAB by emailing us, iab@iab.org. Just know that when you're emailing that list, that includes all of the IAB members. It also includes several other people who are listed up here who regularly work with IAB. We also have an architecture discuss list where if you want to have questions or discussions about broad architecture topics, you are welcome to engage there. And then we also have liaisoncoordination@iab.org as an email alias that you can do to get to the liaison coordinators who are IAB members who are specifically looking out for our relationships with other SDOs and groups. Okay, and now John will take us through our agenda.
All right, so we have just a start what we're talking about now, the welcome and the status update first, followed by a discussion on Etsy by Diego. There was an age restrictions workshop last month, which Mark will illuminate all of us on about the report following the workshop. We have a lovely invited talk on Piracy Shield and its efficacy in Italy by Raffaele. This will be a remote talk. And then we have open mic for whatever time remains after that. The IAB does write documents and ships them as RFCs into the community, of which there are 4 that we've been working on. The top 2 here in this list, the AI control report and the NEMOPS workshop report, have been approved and will be in the RFC editor queue shortly. The following 2 are work that are still ongoing. Something for people here to know about and to also advertise to others is we have a new work help desk. This is basically the IAB is running an experiment to offer help for those who want to bring new work into the IETF. The IAB doesn't have to be the only one doing it, but we are offering to do it and helping folks who might want to understand how to go about bringing new work. Depending on the work, we can give them advice and help. So whatever it is that is needed there, we are happy to help with. And we have a desk near registration, which will be now today later at 5:30 p.m. Oh, sorry, 4:30 p.m. For half an hour. We'll be there, so please advertise as needed. The IAB also runs technical programs. These programs tend to be sort of like they tend to have a theme. We tend to bring in people from the community as is useful or meaningful, and we keep taking input from the community at at the IETFs in general. Right after the IAB Open, we have one such meeting, the EDM program, which is the second one on this list. We have a lunch where we will be discussing the EDM program. So the two programs in the IAB right now are E-Impact and EDM. The E-Impact program is concluding soon. I want to thank everyone who's participated and helped in making this program get to its goals and conclude. That's always a good thing when it happens, when it does well. And this one certainly has done its bit. So thank you again for your input and for helping us get there. EDM is ongoing. We are still discussing what we're going to do with it. If you would like to participate in it, please wait after this meeting and continue on into the lunch. Are we meeting in this room, or is it? It's Crescent.
Crescent. We
Over
don't
in
have
Crescent.
lunch for you.
Yes. Sorry.
But you can not eat lunch with us.
It's a lunch slot. Lunch food is overrated. It's fine. The discussion is more important. With that, we do have one other thing that the IB does is help or start activity by drawing the wider community of not just IETFers but broader into workshops that we organize. And we are organizing a workshop on IP address geolocation. If this is of interest to you, then do look up the details there. I will note, however, that it is a little too late to try and join because the deadline for getting, you can read the papers, certainly, and we'd be happy to talk to you about it. We probably will bring in a report and various other things following the workshop. But this is a workshop around understanding how geolocation, IP geolocation is used today. What are the gaps and problems in using IP addresses for geolocation? And what are the future opportunities in the space of geolocation that we could engage with as not just as a community, but also as IETF and do some work there towards seeing that world actually get better. So we are hoping to have the workshop in the first week of December. We've got several submissions, 32 of them were accepted, and we are hoping to have a very lovely set of discussions in the room. And with that, I think it's back to you.
So previously in the IAB Open and other venues, the IAB has been giving the community updates on the WSIS plus 20 process. And I just wanted to give some updates on our activity recently. So since the last IETF meeting, the IAB has submitted input to this process in 2 different statements. There are different drafts of the paper that come out, and so we have given inputs both to the elements paper and to the zero draft. If you go into the PDF version of these slides, you can get links to the statements. You can also find those statements up on IAB.org. And so for broader context, this is a process that's been going on throughout the year. And this is a slide that I have stolen from Olaf, who has previously talked to the community about this. Just to kind of give you an update on where we are. Earlier in the year, in June, we had the elements paper. This is something where the IAB contributed back our thoughts to that. We had the zero draft come out, and we also were able to provide input. ISOC was also providing input. And essentially, we're at the place where now there are going to be more negotiations that are, I believe, within the governments that are less about getting our input, but we are looking forward to seeing the outcome of that process Olaf, was there anything you wanted to comment on for us? Okay, great. So again, if you are interested or you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out to us, and we encourage you to go and look at the statements that have been made. All right, so that covers the various status updates we had. We're going to be talking more about the other workshop that we held later, so we didn't talk about that at all right now. But first, before we get into that, we're going to go into what we like to do of highlighting different SDOs that we engage with. And this time we're going to be looking at Etsy and getting an introduction to the community for how does Etsy work and what goes on there. So Diego, please come on up and I'll get you the slides.
Thank you. Okay, so the idea basically is just to introduce you, so for those of you who don't know the group of the organization, or will update you about, for those of you who know it, about what Etsy is doing and what is planning to do, and how Etsy, well, how I see that Etsy and IETF can collaborate, because, well, this is not, just to start with it, this is not an institutional introduction by Etsy. I work in Etsy, I have been working in Etsy in the past, and I keep working in Etsy. I am engaged with the IETF, and well, I believe I have a view of both sides and how this collaboration could take place. This is the only, when we're talking with media about organizing this, etc., I told her to wait a few days, because there were more than 1 month, I must confess, to prepare the slides, because I was waiting for the people in Etsy to share with me some data and some concrete matters, not to say things that were only from my personal experience. This is from a recent presentation of the Director General, and this defines very well how Etsy sees itself. Is an organization that has been more than 35 years around. It's originally was based only and focused only on European telecommunication providers and telecommunication infrastructure. Now it's addressing many different aspects that have a global impact. It has more than 900 members. Many of them are small companies and startups and all the like. Is very much committed with certain principles about openness. Something that I like in comparison with other, or probably similar organizations, is that all standards that are published are free of charge. You can access them, play with them, etc. And since some time ago, we are trying, at least in most of the most recent groups, to apply a policy of open access even to the drafts. So you can have a look at how things are going, make your statement, provide some feedback. Formally not participated, because it's membership oriented and you have to be a member to be there, but you can certainly influence and have a view of what's going on. And well, tries to have global reach, etc. Well, this is the portrait of what for sure is what Etsy believes that they are doing. And personally, I think that they're not doing bad, and that's something that that's why I'm here. In terms of how I see Etsy, and well, this is part of these our official aspects as well, is a community that started very much focused on pure telecommunications, but now is dealing with, in general, ICT standardization, dealing with cybersecurity, dealing with IoT, dealing with other aspects. There is a very diverse membership, in the sense that there are not only European, at the very, very beginning, were European telco operators in the good old days of the monopolies. Right now, you have, as I said, more than 900 members, and well, it's open as well to non-members in certain cases. And we will go into this in more detail just to make this clear. Second is something that is important, is that officially recognized by the European Union. It's not a body of the European Union, has a specific link with the European Union, and is committed to address some of the requests from the European Union and to provide to the European Union technical guidance in particular aspects. And let me say this: producing free standards, everything is not. Is a little bit in that sense. Is a little bit not like, but is close to the or closer to the IETF and other bodies. And well, these are the numbers and the way of the technology access. There is the process for IPR declaration, etc. When I learn about the process in both sides, is quite similar. Just to mention this, there are, and this is mainly there are 4 different kind of technical activities. For sure, the ETSI has a supporting structure with a director general, a board, a general assembly with all members, etc., that make or take different decisions. I think that this is something that, well, I will avoid do that among other things because to me it's not totally clear, frankly, which are certain processes to approve this and that. But when it comes to the real work, this is the 4th kind of groups that they are. You have technical committees that are the only ones that are. I mean, it's only allowed for members. You have to pay your membership fee, and are the ones that are directly linked to the formal requests from the European Union. Well, from the European Union and from the European Economic Space, because it includes as well countries like Norway or Switzerland are not part of the formally of the Union. And since Brexit, we have, I think ETSI has as well an agreement with the UK government, but I'm not totally sure about that. And everything goes through the ETSI board. There is something that is a more lightweight approach that is originally was focused on things like that were somehow new stuff to be considered. That is the industry specification groups. It's open to non-members. The idea is that the only thing that you need to do for that is signing an agreement, acknowledging IPR practices, etc., and you are free to participate, though the leadership positions require that you are an ETSI member, which is something that normally is more formal matter than anything else. Some time ago, ETSI started software development groups that was, well, they are open source communities. And there are open source communities in the same style as you can think of the Linux Foundation, the Eclipse Foundation, etc. The idea was simply that, well, ETSI was seeing that more and more practical standardization was taking place in the open source environments, and they wanted to have a direct link to certain activities that were very much connected with the ETSI activities. And then finally, there is something which is a specialist task force. That is basically is that ETSI hires a set of experts to do some work that is not is difficult to be produced by means of the voluntary basis that ETSI works. Typical thing is, for example, if people have worked on an information model and then you have to go for a UML format, this is something that normally is part of the work for the specialist task force. Apart from that, and there are groups working on different matters and with different kinds, there is something important as well that is the global partnerships. ETSI is hosting 2 relevant partnerships. One is one for sure you are totally familiar with this, that's 3GPP. ETSI is the house of 3GPP, and when they have meetings, etc., well, they don't meet there because the ETSI building is not so big for the huge amount of people that used to attend the 3GPP, but formally they're hosting, they're providing secretariat support, etc., to 3GPP that formally is an agreement of ETSI with other regional SDOs. So in Europe, in North America, in Asia, etc. And there is another partnership that is, I mean, it's not so big as 3GPP, but it's quite relevant as well. That is one end-to-end that deals with IoT standards and has a similar agreement. Well, deliverables, and this is important. Deliverables for sure are normative. They are the typical specifications that ETSI has its own rules about the use of should, must, and things like that. And this is the only place in which you can locate that. They are informative, that are reports, there are analysis of a particular landscape or new proposals or etc. reference, many of the results of the group of software development groups are considered reference implementations for validation of standards and interoperability assessment. And the point that I think, the aspect that I believe is more important in the ETSI work is this, what they call the demonstrative deliverables. It's about experimental results. It's about running an experiment under a controlled environment, under the scrutiny of the community and validated by the community, and that provides a result at the end and is reported. And is reported to the hosting group and is published. That two types, depending on whether it is a multi-party evaluation, that is what they call plug tests, or is a much more focused and reduced activity that is what they call proof of concept. So there is a support team that is, apart from all the administrative part, that it supports precisely mainly these demonstrative deliverables, and is the one that hosts the different tools and make them evolve. And they are the core support. You have there the list of the current open source projects that if you look at them and you go into certain detail, you will see that they are very much connected to current ETSI activities. So, work lines. And this is the other slide I'd asked for support from ETSI not to forget any of them. So on the left-hand side, you have the ones I believe are more directly connected to the IETF work, and on the right-hand side is that the others that are, well, they are very much relevant to particular industries or to this mandate on European regulation. And you can see that, well, anything that has to do with networking, things like computing, IoT, network virtualization, automation, sustainability, especially in terms of energy, etc., is in the ETSI realm. On the other hand, you have things like broadcasting. Since the COVID pandemics, they are very much focused on e-health mechanisms and protocols, safety, or aspects related and I was surprised when I started to do this and analyzing this. They are hosting discussions that deal with ICT, information and communication technologies related to aviation, maritime, railroads, etc. So, just as a summary of the most relevant issues or activities, TC Data was recently started. It's about data infrastructures, how you can facilitate a data-enabled economy and data-enabled services. Normally, it's thinking about AI, but it's not necessarily only, or intends to go beyond AI. SAI, which is a really pioneer activity concerned with how AI security should be enforced, and very much focused on explicability and transparency and how you apply controls in the supply chains, and anything that has to do with network management. There is two groups that have been for a long time working on this and very much focused on how to improve. Well, normally the term that is used there commonly is automation. Then the other part that is relevant is security and the convergence of network technologies and security. I want to make a specific remark that, there has been this is one of the areas in which direct collaboration, I believe, will be most interesting. And they are looking not only at, in general, cybersecurity, as well as how applied crypto, the crypto evolution to different aspects that are relevant for ETSI. And something that I know is something that is contentious here for sure, which is about lawful interception. They have a group that is focused on that, and that is, I believe that they will be really interested in having or sharing some views and understanding the views of the IETF community. Finally, just a note is the special case of ORAN. ORAN, for those of you who don't know, is about using cloud mechanisms for providing radio access. And the idea is that this was originally an open source association. They want to make some of the aspects part of standards, and this is hosted by ETSI. Just to finish, what I believe is that what it could come next and would be interesting is to strengthen the collaboration. Very much like I think that there is a formal collaboration between IETF and 3GPP, and I would encourage that we explore this. And less formally, and this is basically the formal is appointing, signing an MOU, appointing a liaison, making periodic reports, keeping mutual awareness, etc. And this is something that they exist, and in the past, it was for ETSI, it was a problem because the IETF didn't have a legal status. Right now with the LLC, that's, at least for the ETSI side, would be okay in terms of legal. I mean, I'm talking about what the attorneys believe. Less formal. Very often I have heard here in the IETF, no, this is a niche solution. This is something that is not of interest for the internet at large. It's in that concrete aspect can play a role of coordinating or even exploring the way of applying things, as I said, to the railroad industry or to telcos. Things that are of a high interest to telcos, but are not of the interest for the whole IETF community could be applicable there. And well, and this idea of the demonstrative deliverables that, well, if the IETF wants to play with, would be quite interesting as well, I would say. And that's all. I'm finished. 20 seconds.
Thank you. And we have a queue of a couple people. So Vicky was first.
Hi, Vicky Risk. Thank you for this. Do you know, does ETSI have a role in producing any of the technical requirements under the CRA?
Indetectable?
The technical requirements under the Cyber Resilience Act, does ETSI have a role
yeah,
in that?
Yeah,
Do you know
yeah.
which
That's
ones
something that comes when it comes with the technical requirements, there need to be a formal request from the European Commission. As far as I can tell, I'm not involved in the cybersecurity team, but I think so. Maybe, I don't know if Roberto knows about that. So you know about that, but
okay,
very likely,
Victoria
yes.
will tell
yeah,
us.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right, Peter.
Peter Kochdini, good morning. Maybe furthering on that part, ETSI is one of the 3 European standards organizations that receive these standardization requests. And some of the work deals with things that come out of the IETF and others. That means that there's the question of referenceability of those, but also the understanding of the standards process. And of course, the idea in the European standards landscape is a bit different. There's conformity, and especially under the NLF, you have conformity, compliance, and then market surveillance, and so on and so forth. Things that are not necessarily on our radar here. That said, this is not going to go away, and the NLF is probably broadening, where CRA being the second example of that, the RAD first. What do you, or what does the IAB, how do you view or try to address this, this kind of special relationship, still understanding this is just a regional initiative, but kind of a bit market, and how would the IAB address that to avoid duplication of efforts, as in European Standards Organization being quote, quote, forced to replace, duplicate, or amend products of the IETF? Thank you.
If I may, well, two comments on this. Well, ETSI is trying to, I mean, ETSI has European roots, but the global, and many of the things that ETSI is producing is focused on the global markets, and we have participants. Well, just to give you an example, the chairs of a couple of groups are from Japan and China, so that's something that's processes are not exactly the same, for sure. And when we are under a formal request from the European Commission, we have to follow the formal request of the European Commission. In that respect, for sure, is something that, well, that there could be some divergence. Precisely what I believe is important of a tightened, I'm saying not necessarily formal, but a tightened collaboration or a tight collaboration would be that the awareness or the mutual awareness of what ETSI is doing, why it's doing so, and why IETF feels comfortable or uncomfortable, things would be much clearer. That's my view, and something that would simplify the process. When it comes to duplicating and references, etc., well, at least, I mean, this is for sure, this is based on the people participating, etc. I have spent my whole life trying to avoid reinventing the wheel. And it would be ideal to have the opportunity of directly and comfortably referencing IETF work, and the other way around. It's in that respect, it's totally transparent in references, etc. So it's something that would be simply something like this would simplify the process and would clarify how things are. And let me say, I'm not talking about building any dependencies or less formal whatever. It's simply just making softer and easier the coordination between the two organizations.
Colin?
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Diego. Just to answer Vicky's question about the CRA, there is a whole new working group set under.
This is your man, yes, definitely.
Set up under TC Cyber, which is working on a very, very large number of detailed documents in support of the CRA, with a view to trying to get as much done by December. Having said that, I would just echo what Diego said about that. Although ETSI has a EU status, it is very much a global standards body. Just as another example of interaction between IETF and ETSI, PQIP this afternoon has a session where Matt Campagna, who is chair of the ETSI Quantum Safe Cryptography Group, will be giving a briefing. So there's an area of overlap there. And finally, I'm not sure if Diego said this or not, but ETSI has sent a request to IETF to have a formal liaison relationship. And I think this talk is very helpful into explaining to people why this would be a really, really useful thing because of the, you know, the strength of the two organizations. Thanks.
Vittorio?
Yeah, I mean, in part you already got the reply. I mean, for anyone interested, there's quite a complex situation. I mean, there is a commission-appointed expert groups of which I am one of the members that is sort of coordinating the interpretation of the CRA. And then there are standardization organizations, both Sensenelec and ETSI, working on some of the like 37 different documents that have to be produced, because now there is going to be a standard on how to make your software secure for each of the possible types of software. So one for browsers, one for operating systems. So this is the kind of really, really complex, maybe too complex work that Europe is trying to do. And to be honest, I mean, in the end, ETSI is involved. I must say, if I mean, don't quote me, or my perception is that in certain places in Brussels, there's a bit of diffidence against ETSI for the fact that it's still so much open to the private sector. So there's this idea that if we go to Sensenelec, it will be under public control. If we go to ETSI, then the big companies from the US and China will have a lot of weight. And this is, let's say, fad, possibly, but I heard this a lot in Brussels, so this might be something. Oh, and in terms of, I mean, getting IETF stuff recognized, the European Commission also has a process to recognize standards produced outside of the European standardization organizations and make them European in a way, or at least make them usable in public procurement, for example. And through the process, there's a way to recognize RFCs and say, okay, we adopt these RFCs as official standards that can be used in Europe. In the end, of course, the best way for the IETF to produce stuff that is accepted and used in Europe is to meet the public policy objectives of Europe. So, of course, if the IETF produces stuff that is not in line with what the European Commission or the European Parliament wants to do, and this might happen on stuff like the age verification, quite curious, or I mean, or lawful interception. So then maybe it will mean the IETF standards will not be recognized as. But in general, the approach is that whenever there's an IETF standard that works and it is already adopted globally, there's no desire to make another standard again in Europe.
Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation there, Diego. As an ETSI board member and former chair, I would note that the impenetrable processes are penetratable and understandable, although they're a bit messy. What I really wanted to underline, though, is I think, as other speakers have indicated, ETSI is a good bridge between IETF and the more formal standards world, in that it's kind of got a foot in both camps. It tends, therefore, to get shot at from both sides. But it's been a good bridge for the almost 40 years it's existed now, and I think it could be of use to IETF when they need to go into the more formal side of Europe as a bridge to link in. Thanks.
Okay.
Does the IETF have liaisons with other organizations that have this sort of geographic kind of scope?
Right, I think that was something that was alluded to earlier.
I'm sorry, I may have missed it.
Yeah.
No,
No.
That's one of the things that was brought up, and I think that's something we need to discuss.
I'm just trying to understand whether there's precedent.
Could I just note that as Diego has alluded, Etsy does not have a strict geographic scope. It has in the title. Many global companies operate via their European subsidiaries to have full membership, and whether you have full or associate membership does not change your ability to work on the technical side or membership.
Just to make things clear, Etsy is not producing things that are only to be applied in Europe or that are addressing only European problems or issues. It's simply, this is a little bit like saying that since the IETF has the offices in the US, it's a US-centric organization.
The IETF's name is not the US.
No, I'm not saying
I mean, it's really not that's not really appropriate.
Take into account, European has to do because it's the origin. If you, I mean, that's the only, or is the main problem about making a collaboration is European because it originally was a European organization and now it's based in Europe for sure. But that's all.
But it's really not the case. Okay, we can debate this separately, but I really don't think it's the case that like the status at Etsy is similar in terms of a multi-stakeholder organization to ISO or to IETF because it really is European centered.
No,
okay.
and say you it's not the case. That's it.
Okay, I don't agree.
Okay,
I'm
done.
Yeah, yeah, you're done. Just Ecker, to your, thank you. To your question, looking through the current liaisons, and we can have more discussion. I think the only one that would potentially come under that is we technically have a liaison to ECMA, which originally had a name of European Computer Manufacturers Association in it, but I think has since changed. So maybe that's precedent. I don't know. That's something we will discuss. Thank you for the input. Okay. Next up, Mark is going to take us through our recent workshop.
That's the new one? Yeah. Oh, thank you. So we held a workshop. And this came about earlier this year. We were talking with some of our colleagues over at the W3C and especially on the W3C tag, and we identified an interest in exploring the space around what's become a big topic and a topic that certainly causes a lot of different perspectives and feelings, but is much more current than it was a couple of years ago, which is controlling access to content online based upon people's age. And what we're seeing is a number of jurisdictions around the world are introducing laws and introducing mechanisms to achieve that goal via various means. And we're seeing concurrent impact on the internet. And so we wanted to get together and talk about that and come to an understanding about, what the technical community thinks about that and what we might say about it. So this was from the workshop announcement that we came up with, talking about the architectural implications of different approaches to implementing age-based restrictions on access to online content. Note, we don't just say age verification there because that's just one technique. There are a lot of other things in this space as well. And so we wanted to perform a thorough examination of the technical and architectural choices that are involved in solutions. We do not expect to identify a single candidate solution, and indeed we did not. The goal is to build a shared understanding of the properties of various proposed approaches. So this was the agenda that the program committee came up with at a very high level. We talked about principles because we had a lot of folks in the room who were not familiar, especially with the architectural principles of the internet or the web. So we talked about those. We talked about human rights principles. And then we had some presentations and discussions about the potential impacts of these technologies, a particular dive into where enforcement happens, because that's a very important decision. There are many different choices here in terms of where you apply these policy decisions. And then we kind of did a survey of common techniques that are talked about or used today, including server-side solutions leveraging things like government identity and, of course, our good friends zero knowledge proofs, age estimation techniques using biometrics, so behavioral analysis, stuff like that, age inference, in-network enforcement, and on-device enforcement. And then we reserved most of the time for discussion. When we had presentations, we gave guidance that they should be about 10 minutes long. The bulk of the 2.5 days we spent was in discussion as a group, and that was quite fruitful. So yeah, it was 2.5 days. We had 36 attendees. 3 of them were remote. We also had a few extra observers from the IAB. It was a crowd from many different perspectives. We had IATF and W3C folks, of course. We also had people working for the vendors of these technologies. We had civil society participants. We had government participants, which was great. It was held under Chatham House rule, a modified Chatham House rule, that we're going to release a report with identities of the people who participated, but we're not attributing statements to people, to give people a little more comfort around being able to express themselves freely. We got some feedback that was useful. And we had 9 of those presentations just to kind of frame the discussions and kick off the back and forth. So for example, this is one of the slides that was presented about one of the challenges that we see in this area, which is the shared responsibilities in this space and how they might be distributed. We're working on the report that'll come out. Hopefully we're shooting for by the end of the year, at least for a 0-0 draft. But some of the observations we made so far, some of the things we took away from the workshop, was that collaboration across all the different components of this discussion is really important, and it's not really happening effectively yet. That people are having, technical discussions that are isolated. They're having policy discussions that are isolated. You have vendors who are putting forth proposals, but they're not taking into account all the different diverse perspectives. And so convening discussions like this is really valuable. And everyone that we talked to there was very happy to see this discussion take place because they hadn't seen anything like this yet. One of the other takeaways we had was that it's pretty clear that technical solutions are not the only part, are not sufficient here, that there needs to be more coordination and thought about how there needs to be a whole of society approach to these problems rather than just throwing technology at it. Surprisingly, one of the takeaways also was that identifying the roles was important to folks, and that hadn't been clearly done yet in a lot of cases. The different actors in these systems weren't clearly defined in a lot of people's heads, and having that clarity is really important. Likewise, for the vocabulary, there was a lot of friction around what terms we use for different things, and having a definitive vocabulary was something that people saw as really important. A common observation was that having a quote unquote silver bullet approach, just one technical solution to this is very likely not to be adequate. That needs to be a blended approach where for different situations, especially when you think about the edge cases where age estimation, for example, is great for distinguishing a 55-year-old from a 16-year-old, but it's really awful at distinguishing a 16-year-old from a 17-year-old. And so you're probably going to need other techniques if you're relying on that. Likewise, if you're relying on government identity, well, you have to realize that a lot of people don't have access to that. They don't have a passport, or they don't have a driver's license, or they're a stateless person. And so you need other mechanisms to fill in those holes. Another common theme was that there's a tendency in some of these discussions to try and pin liability on one party, to make a particular tech company liable for all of the making mistakes in age verification, or to say that some other party is responsible, when in fact it's much healthier. And then this goes back to the slide we were looking at before. It's healthier to think about this in terms of shared responsibility across the ecosystem, where parents have a role, and society has a role, governments have a role, and of course the technical actors have a role. And in terms of kind of how to make progress, when we talked, and we had huge lists of potential risks and potential outcomes that we kind of collaborated and brainstormed to collect. we were thinking that a useful next step may be to map those risks into the architectures that are being proposed to try and understand their nature more deeply. So in terms of next steps, yeah, we're producing a report. Like I said, we hope that we're going to get that out by the end of the year. This is a very timely topic, and so we want to make sure that it has the impact that it deserves. I think on the IAB, as well as over in the W3C and on the tag, there's some discussion about whether we might make additional statements, try and guide the discussion more from those viewpoints. There are certainly people talking about specific technical work already. I think in dispatch we saw one example of that with Longfellow. But those are just technical, building blocks. They're not the whole picture. And so there's this coordination function, this larger discussion. We're still not sure how that should happen. There's a question as to whether a place like the IETF is really the right place to convene that. But a lot of people felt that it would be nice if there was more convenings like this. I think that's all I have to say. Oh yes, so here's the link to the data tracker about this. We have almost all the slides up. There's one more presentation we need to get permission to republish. We have all the submissions, the papers that were submitted by the attendees, except for a few where they requested that we not publish them publicly. And eventually, of course, we'll have the report. I do want to highlight this was a joint workshop. This was not just the IAB. This was also the W3C. On the W3C side, my co-chair was Martin Thompson, who's sitting right over here. So I don't know if you want to get the mic and say anything else, but that's the short summary. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more to talk about in this space, especially once we get the report fleshed out.
Yeah, so Martin Thompson, I think Mark did a pretty good job of summarizing where we're at. It was 2.5 days. It was pretty intensive. I think by the end of it, people were getting a little tired, but we did manage to put together some really interesting material, and I think you should expect to see the report containing some really interesting things to think about more than any conclusions, though.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so one of the things that I think from the W3C tag side of things is we're continuing to have these discussions, and we will talk to the IAB about this and consider whether or not there is anything that we might be able to say that would help focus discussion. I think Mark's point here about the venue for that discussion is one that we don't have an answer for.
Yeah.
I think this is much bigger than any one of these organizations. And the fact that we were able to do a joint workshop is great, but the discussions very much highlighted that this is probably a problem that is bigger than even two organizations such as this can grapple, and there may be other forums that we need to look to.
Yeah, well said.
All right, we have a bit of a queue. Arno?
Speaking about the organizations, thank you, Martin. So I will speak as ITUT SG17. So thank you for this very good work. SG17, of course, because of the intergovernmental aspect of ITU, you can imagine that channel protection is a topic. There is a whole thing that cascaded from ITU Council, where there is a channel protection working group down to my study group. We have a very good what we call a correspondence group, that's a task force where people work together with the mission to analyze the gap analysis we have on standardization. We had the first leg before the April plenary meeting, and then we decided to continue that because we thought the gap analysis was done and it was not done. So we realized we have more gaps. We're going to come with more gaps soon. Regarding this, we had a very good workshop as part of that with Tony Allen and the people in ISO and so on. So we have very good collaboration. We have an established procedure called 8.23 with between ITU and ISO. There is a resolution 7 that specifies the relationship between our bodies. So Martin is right. We need to perhaps take a step back and understand where we could do things. So it's a problem. You did a great job. My only ask right now would be if you could send me a liaison statement before my second meeting in December. That would help to trigger, hey guys, that's a problem. Let's continue to work on that. And what are the next steps for this one? Thank you very much.
I think we can do that. And then with any luck, we might even have a draft report by that time. I think, you know, was a sense in the room, and certainly I have a sense that we, you know, it's not that we want to duplicate or compete with what's happening out there already. It's just that there was a feeling that some of the discussions have been happening without the viewpoint representative of what the impact is on the internet architecture and on the ecosystem, and that's important in the design space here too.
So thank you, Mark. Let's say whenever you are ready, send us a liaison statement, because as management team, I can manage it any way we want. So that will be really helpful, and we can continue to work together and find more ways. Thank you very much.
That sounds great. Thank you. Definitely remember to do that.
Fabio?
Vaibhav Vajpayee, House of Platna Institute. Thank you very much for organizing this workshop. It's highly timely in nature. Looking at the presentation, I was just wondering, since you talked quite a bit about what technical challenges are there and what technical solutions were discussed, was there also discussion on whether this is a good idea? Because it seems like different countries are in different state of opinion, right? And so UK and Australia have a position. Germany currently does not have a position. So I see this in newspapers every day, debating whether this is a good idea. So what was discussed within the participants about that? Is my question. Yeah.
That certainly did come up, and there were some participants who I think, as you can anticipate, had very strong feelings about that. We certainly had some of that discussion, but you know, if we allowed it to happen too much, it would have consumed the entire workshop and much, much more. So we tried to keep it narrowed to the position that we acknowledge this is happening in some parts of the world. So what is the impact on the technical architecture and on the ecosystem, and how do we highlight the negative parts of the impact and perhaps mitigate them? If we're making value judgments about it, then that is a somewhat different discussion, which I think most of the participants had strong feelings about.
Could I ask a second part was also us. So you talked about content-based restrictions. So what kind of content is being restricted? Was there a discussion within the workshop? Because previously at a side meeting, we discussed parental controls, and we talked a bit about screen time for gaming.
Right.
There could also be pornographic content, but did you also discuss other taxonomy of different kind of content that could be restricted by age?
They came up a few times, in that there is a tendency, and it's an easy tendency to fall into, to just say, well, this is for pornography. And it became very clear that it's not, that it is, there are many use cases already that folks have for it. We talk about social media, we talk about other kinds of content, young or old. And then there was a discussion about how once the technical capability is available and widespread, it will have a tendency to be used for even other things and new cases, and you have that spread, and whether that's desirable. Hopefully this is all going to come out in the report.
All right, Tom.
Hi, good morning, Tom Newton. I want to first thank the folks who organised that workshop for A, great job, and B, schlepping halfway across the world in order to do it. I think there's a recognition that the IETF, IAB, W3C, even all together is not sufficient to be the place for it. On the other hand, as we know, nature abhors a vacuum. And into that vacuum will always flow unpleasant things. The idea of this is not something we should be doing, or is it even a good idea? I'm afraid that that's a discussion that has long become moot. These things will happen. We can see recently the UK government have found another little bit of vacuum, and into that they have put, should we ban VPNs? Now, looking around this room, you'd see shakings of heads and rolling of eyes that it's almost audible when someone mentions banning VPNs. But we are not the sort of people who make policy decisions. The sort of people who make policy decisions look at the world out there, look at something that they want to achieve, and if we don't give them something to some useful tools to achieve it, they will achieve it with the tools they believe they have at their disposal, which might be garbage, and in that case are. So it is on us to produce an opportunity for people to do more correct things, even if some of those things are things we might not agree are useful for us, or we might even not agree with them in principle. If we don't address these points that the wider society has for the internet, then we will end up with more unpleasant foolishness arriving on our doorstep. So thanks again for a really incredibly productive discussion, and I hope we can take it further on and involve more people in the process.
Thank you. I think I'll go out on a limb and say when we think about an IAB and perhaps W3C statement, it is along the lines of speaking from the technical authority of these bodies to highlight those kinds of impacts that might not be anticipated by policymakers.
Yeah, so a few points. I think someone mentioned that Germany doesn't have a position on this, but the EU does. The EU guidance lines on protection of children explicitly require age assurance, basically. So as a practical matter, that's the EU position. I mean, you may say the guidelines are optional if you like, but like they're kind of sort of only optional. I think there may be something for the IETF to do here. I want to be a little wary about us like just jumping into stuff where we think there's or you said nature, someone said nature abhors a vacuum, but the IETF apparently abhors a vacuum too. And you know, we have a sort of relatively narrow set of expertise on a particular set of things. And this is a set of, and in fact, many of the most controversial points about age assurance do not, in fact, impinge on the IETF's expertise in any meaningful way. That's not to say they're not important. They simply don't impinge on our expertise. And so what I would like us to make sure we do not do is jump into things where we do not have a lot of credibility and say things that are not, that will have the impact of diminishing our credibility. I think that some of the discussion, I think, in the workshop that was perhaps most useful from the IHS perspective was discussion on architectures and about whether like network-based versus device-based architectures. Those are things where we do in fact have some understanding and credibility. And in particular, Mark, as you were saying about the impact of those architectural choices on the openness of the internet. So, you know, if you make architectural choices, for instance, require endpoints to behave in certain ways, that has an impact on the choices on the internet. And I certainly don't want to go into this in detail, but I think those are places where we are on very strong ground and where we understand what we're talking about. You know, where we are much less strong ground is on talking about, you know, facial legitimation versus zero knowledge proofs, those kinds of things. Those are things where we're not particularly strong ground, and I think we should avoid those in our IETF capacity, though of course in our personal capacities we may feel much more engaged.
100%. Yeah.
All right, Dave.
Dave Planca, WISCNet. Thanks, Mark, for the presentation, and especially about how it's expansive in the multiple components. What I wanted to mention was last week, the day before the Internet Measurement Conference, there was a workshop called PRIME, which is policy-based internet measurements. And there was a presentation there from the Georgia Tech folks. Weirdly, this was a non-publishing venue, so we'll have to contact the authors to get this slide set, but it was called Papers, Please, a First Look at Age Verification on the Web. Oh, yeah, yeah. And the one thing I remember taking away from their talk was this information sharing aspect and the privacy concerns here. What they were seeing was a lot of US-based companies were buying age verification from a company, and they'd find that they were just a front for another company that was doing age verification. And so the information about their users was being spread more broadly than they expected. So maybe the takeaway is first, let's find these authors and, you know, catch up with what they're doing. I think this is very early work, and that's why they didn't publish it yet. But the idea of making the measurement aspect a key component to the architecture so that we can find things like this would be great.
Right. We did have presentations along that line and extensive discussion along those lines. So yeah. I got it.
As an individual, the next steps you have, this is along the lines of what Eker was saying earlier. The coordination function seems to be crucial for moving the conversation forward. If it just gets broken into pieces under W3C and pieces under IETF, I don't know that it really will do the function of resolving this in the longer term. How do you intend to go about the coordination across all of these?
Like Martin said, I think we're not sure yet. There's perhaps layers to coordination, certainly coordination on the technical program once it becomes apparent what the appropriate technical program is, which we have processes for that. That's something that we have mechanisms to address. But I think what we're more concerned about here is at the higher layer, the coordination of the discussion between the policymakers and the technical community and all the other stakeholders in this is a big problem. And it's a place where our voice as a technical community hasn't been heard very much. And so what the appropriate place for that is still amorphous. We're pretty sure it's not an IETF mailing list, though.
I agree with that. And I was going to say that it seems like what you need is a more continuous engagement
Indeed.
mechanism.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear more later.
Wes Hertiger, and as I said in the workshop, my views are my own and not any of my various affiliations. I think one of the big takeaways for me is we have architected in the IETF and in many standards organization an environment which is free and open, and there's a discrepancy between the consumers and the publishers with what I as a consumer may be okay with reading or viewing or whatever that might be versus what the publisher may want to publish. And there's no coordination among that right now. And I may be a guardian, I may be a guardian of young children, I may be a guardian of older people. I have a good friend that lost a lot of money to somebody that is technically, she's in a conservatorship and was taken advantage of because her guardians had no ability to control the types of interactions that they were having. And the reality is, I may be comfortable and want to be in a safe place on the internet, only viewing and consuming certain types of information, but yet I would never want to impose the limitations on publishers for what they can do. So how do we find the place technologically where we can find that middle ground of me being able to be in a safe place where I know, I'm going to get the information that I want, and yet not impose restrictions on publishers. And I think we're a very, very, very long way from that. And I think that, very much came out of the workshop as well. It's not age-based. It's safety-based, right? How do we produce an environment where anybody of any age can say, this is not a type of material that I want to consume. Please restrict me from doing that. And obviously both sides can lie. Obviously both sides can work around the problem space. That's subject to future debate, but it's a much bigger problem than just age.
Yeah, so Martin Thompson, one of the things that came up during the workshop over again and again, and I think Wes's comments are indicative of that, is just how much this ends up in the political sphere and how much we are at risk of creeping well outside of our domain of expertise, because I think some of the things that Wes said there, those are political statements and they are not statements that really have any technical bearing. And yet they are technical questions bound up in those things. And that will continue to be the problem here. I think my initial inclination is that the coordination functions necessary to operate something sensible here is much larger than the scope of this organization or the W3C or anything like that. Technical standards are a too small a component to Eka's point earlier. The other thing that I think you probably didn't put on your slides that I think is important to indicate here was that throughout the course of the discussions, I observed a number of people learning something and perhaps changing their positions. A lot of people come into these debates and discussions with a degree of certainty about how things should be, how they understand the world, and you come into the discussion, and those 2 days were eye-opening for some people in various ways. Seeing those different perspectives and understanding them was, I think, a very valuable portion of the discussion. And so I think, though it won't be manifest in the report or anything that comes afterwards, having some of the key actors in the space gain that deeper appreciation for different perspectives and changing their views on the extent to which they are certain about what is the right thing to do, I think was good. I was one of those people.
Yeah. Well said, and I see a couple people who are there nodding as well, so yeah.
So, Vittorio Bertola. So, first of all, this is happening. If anyone thinks that this will not happen or can be stopped, as I said in the chat, next week in Italy, we start to have to, people that want to use pornographic websites, at least the major ones, have to start to prove their identity with a special app promoted by the European Commission. And what I note, I don't know this system yet. From the technical standpoint, I have some ideas. But whenever the countries try to do this without having the competence, they end up doing really terrible things. And in Italy, we already have the infamous piracy shield, which is a sort of blocking of content done in a terrible way. And this is exactly because there is no globally accepted standard on how to do this, both in terms of technical ways, especially in terms of policy. So at least for the technical part, if the community could produce something, I think would make life better for a lot of people that live in the countries that will do this anyway. And also, please remember to include all perspectives also, because the problem, this specific problem, looks very different depending on whether you are in a country that already has a digital public identity system or in a country that does not have one. Because if there's no public identity, then it will be a matter of private sector and risks and third parties and economic incentives. While with the public sector, then you have the risks connected with the public identity, but then some things are already clearer. So sometimes in these discussions, I listen to objections that do not make sense in my own environment, but maybe make sense in another one. And also, if possible, please extend the discussion. As one of the people that had applied for the workshop and were not accepted, I understand that there's not room for everyone. Also, my contribution was not really good. It was rushed at the last 5 hours. But there's a lot of people that would like to participate and I think would have something to contribute. And also, it's not really possible to do this discussion in isolation from the policy side. So I think you need to find ways to include the policy side, including people that will have opinions that maybe you don't fully like. The final comment is that it's fine for you to put out a statement. I was a bit concerned by hearing that you want to list all the negative impacts that this has on the internet architecture. It's fine because there are negative impacts. But if you put out a statement that only lists a lot of negatives and says, oh, it's better if you don't do this, it will be ignored. So the IETF will be listened to if it has a solution. If it has, if we have collectively a solution that is the least bad we can produce, we will be influential. So otherwise, we will just be noted around.
Go ahead and respond to that, Martin.
Yeah. So the work that we did there was more to identify requirements, I think, and that's the value. And so that does sort of play into the negatives a little bit, things to avoid as requirements, but predominantly the list of things that we produced that I think is going to be most valuable is a comprehensive set of requirements. And I think, given that we had 60 odd items on that list, I think we're going to be doing pretty well on that one.
Yeah. All right, last word for Arnaud, and let's keep it relatively short, then we move on to the next.
So sorry to come back again. Something I forgot actually. We have a report we could share on our site. It's not about specifically edge assurance, but the result of our own China non-protection task force. So I will approve it in December. I can send it to you by liaison statement. That's the first point. The second point is about the policy side. So the policy side, I'm not sure people understand how IG-17 works, but as we are intergovernmental, we are bound by resolutions. There is a resolution on China protection at ITU level, at the overall ITU level, not just the ITU-T level. I suspect that there is going to be contributions in TSAC for improving those resolutions. And that's going to happen very quick because plenipotentiary being in November 26, the whole mechanics to get things done by 26, if you are not getting them like now in the pipeline, they will never happen. Perhaps the thing that IETF could consider here, and maybe something that Roman and I discussed earlier offline, but what we could offer here as IG-17 is keep doing your work. That's great, right? The big thing I can offer is that in my study group, I have the member states are there, right? They are the regulators, those people that are going to put things in their regulation. The reason why I have so much pressure on my shareholders here to get the charters, not sure you understand how it is to make a charter. I have to get contributions, official contributions by member states, word by word by word. So that's a great opportunity to educate them, get them understand things, get the right words, get the right thinking, get the right things in their head, because what they like in the study group is to learn. That informs their future approach to things, the plus, the minus, but as well the way they socialize that between themselves, the way they make alliances between themselves, the way we build the consensus. So maybe here, back to Martin, who makes a point about there are perhaps things that we should look elsewhere. Maybe here, SG17 could help you on what I can see, because I'm not the only one at all, but maybe I can give a little contribution to that piece here, just for your consideration.
Thank you for the engagement. All right.
All right. Well,
Appreciate it.
we should talk.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mark. And thanks for all the discussion on that. We really appreciate the engagement, feedback, and we look forward to reviewing the report. All right. And so now we're going to move on to our invited talk. Thank you, Raphael, for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you. You should be able to control the slides on your end now. So,
yes. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. I'm Rafael Sumesa. I'm assistant professor at the University of Twente. And I mean, after this really interesting discussion about how like policymakers do not listen, unfortunately, to the technical people, I want to tell you actually an Italian story that is the story of Piracy Shield and of this study that we did about the effectiveness and the collateral damage that this anti-piracy platform that has been deployed in Italy has caused. So this is basically a bit of an Italian story. You may think of why the entire IETF should care about Italy. And the reason is because a lot of European countries and a lot of countries all around the world are thinking of implementing similar practice for blocking illegal streaming content all around the world. And the story is actually about how a small group of influential people can convince an entire country to implement something that is very draconian in terms of filtering rule. And I will describe you in a second how it works and how this can easily go wrong, all in the name of football. And so how all of these was effectively born. And to tell you how this was born, I will tell you first how the law was born. So the law was the Law 93 of 2023, so 2 years ago, was voted on 12th of July 2023, and was voted unanimously by the Chamber and the Senate. In Italy, we have Chamber and Senate for voting laws. So all the political parties agreed that this law was right, and this law was doing the right thing. Basically, what the law allowed was that copyright holder had the right to request the blocking of an IP, and I put between parentheses before, and you will understand later on why, address and domain names involved in the sole activities of illegal football streaming within 30 minutes of detection. So if they request a block, within 30 minutes, that block should be effective. And the important thing is that this should be the sole activities. So there should be certain that on that IP address, on that fully qualified domain name, there is only the legal streaming activity, nothing else. And AGCOM, that is the national authority for communication in Italy, oversees basically the blocking platform and communicate this blocking to the internet service provider. And there is no unblocking concept in the law. The blocks are permanent and the block stays there forever. You can clearly see how this can go wrong. In fact, a couple of days later, the start of the platform, Cloudflare was actually blocked, and that caused like several collateral damages all around Italy for the Italian internet, with thousands of websites that were not accessible. Then was the case of Impervia and Zenlayer, other two popular CDN. And finally, in October 2024, we had that they decided to block Google Drive. So they decided to block basically the domain name of Google Drive. And that basically caused major damage in all Italy because Google Drive was blocked for more than a day in the entire Italy. So after that, basically what happened is that there was a new law. The law was updated, and now the law states that the address should be used predominantly for illegal activities and not as a sole activity. So the law is sort of saying, yeah, okay, there could be collateral damage, but if the activity is mostly legal, we still block that resource. And there is an official unblocking concept now, so you can request an unblock of a resource if, for example, there was a mistake. Unfortunately, this block should be requested within 5 days. But list of blocks is not public, so you need to figure out by yourself that you have been blocked. And VPN and DNS providers all around the world are also subject to applying this filtering independently of where they are located. And if an internet service provider has the suspicion of illegal activities from a user, they need to contact the police. Otherwise, there is 1 year in jail. This is in the law of 2024. So, in short, what is Piracy Shield? Piracy Shield is a mechanism that grants unvetted blocking powers to private entities because copyright holders are private entities. There is no clear expiration of the or review process of the block orders because the block orders never expire and the blocking of the resource never expires. There's a lot of lack of transparency because no public registry of the blocked resource is published, not even under the Freedom of Information Act. And there is a lot of collateral damage incidents that affect legitimate service. And I showed you the case of Google Drive, of Cloudflare, and so on. But despite what to all of you, probably technical people in the room, seems a recipe for disaster, the Italian Communication Authority, Agicom, has defended the platform, highlighting basically the large number of IPs and domains that were blocked by the platform. That if you may think about this like saying that law is effective because the law is putting a lot of people in jail. So it's not a really good metric. So what is really behind this metric of more than 10,000 IPv4 and 40,000 fully qualified domain names that are nowadays blocked in Italy? Can we shed a bit of light on this? And that's what we did as part of this study. So the first step was, of course, there is no public list. So we need to reconstruct a bit of transparency and try to reconstruct this list of blocked resources. Luckily enough, there was like a GitHub repo that was leaking continuously the list of blocked resources. Probably was some Italian operator or someone that has access to the platform, and they were actually pushing weekly snapshot, and they're still pushing weekly snapshot of the blocking resources. The problem is that you cannot write a scientific paper out of something that is not verified. So there is a page of Agicom where you can basically verify a single address at time, and you need to solve a CAPTCHA to do that. So we did that. We took all the address and one by one we solved them through the platform, and we identify basically that there were indeed the list was indeed legitimate, and indeed there was the IP address blocked by the Piracy Shield platform. So once we had basically reconstructed transparency, we managed to map blocking activity from February 2024 to June 2025, finding 10,000 of IPv4 addresses that were blocked and 42,000 fully qualified domain names that were blocked. All of these were originated by around 4,000 blocking requests by copyright holders. So a copyright holder can send a request that blocks multiple resources at a time. And the interesting part is that 98% of these IPs and 44% of these FQDN remain still blocked as June 2025, but as still nowadays, if you check the statistics. So, and the interesting part, of course, is that blocking activity peaked during the weekend because this platform target illegal streaming of football, and football usually is streamed during the weekends. Now, we have no data of before 2024. This probably was the most interesting part because the platform made a lot of mistakes back at the time, but these still provide like a solid base for understanding platform activity. The first thing that we did is that we started to look who are these people that got blocked, and we found out that basically across these 2000/24 that got blocked over 200 ASN, 77% of them were geolocated within European Union and 38% were in the Netherlands. And a single hosting company was responsible for more than 10% of all the blocking IPs, and these were all concentrated in 15/24. Instead, OBH, Scaleway, and Helsener that also had like a lot of blocked IP at a more different pattern. Their blocked IP was scattered across different /24, meaning that basically probably streamers were leveraging shared infrastructure to illegal streamers were leveraging shared infrastructure to stream their content. And this can be also seen by the fact that OVH is the only one that has the vast majority of unblocked IP that is very rare on this platform, indicating that somehow they managed to notify to the authority that these IPs then were lately being reused for benign purposes. Also, as you have seen, the platform has a lot of unlocking activity, basically unblocking activities for FQDN. But the truth is that it's not because they want to release that FQDN, but just because the law imposes the maximum technical limit of 20,000 FQDN, and they reached at a certain point that technical limit. So they had to basically drop all the resources from the list to make space to a new one. We also found out that basically legal streamers abandon resource over time. Only 51% of the blocked IPs are still responsive to the probe. So as you can imagine, there may be a lot of collateral damage here. So we try to investigate this collateral damage. And the first thing that we noticed that there was a lot of IPs that were belonging to leased prefix, and actually 24% of all the blocked IPs were leased. And we don't know if the illegal streamers do this on purpose, because they may just leverage like a hosting company that in turn use IP leasing for obtaining resource, or they may use that on purpose for changing constantly the IPs to evade the blocking. But what we found is that 4% of the blocked IPs were leased out to new users after the block was implemented. And with the help of our IPXO, we identified 250 IP that were released to different companies after the blocking date. That means that there are unsuspecting businesses that are acquiring blocked and unusable resources in the Italian market and they cannot use. So the second part that we look at, I mean, I don't need to explain that an IP address can be used to host multiple services in terms of ports and multiple also web pages, website through the concept of the host. So collateral damage may happen at different level. You can have the collateral damage where multiple websites are hosted on the same machine. You can have collateral damage where the name server of the machine get blocked, the mail of the machine get blocked, and so on. We use OpenIntel. That's a large-scale DNS measurement platform that we run at University of Twente, where we measure basically around 80% of the global DNS second-level domain namespace every day to assess the collateral damage due to the blocking of web, mail, and DNS infrastructure, analyzing 262 million domain names collected from OpenIntel and 1.8 billion FQDN from city logs in search basically for collateral damage. And we found a lot of collateral damage, of course. We identified that a total of 7,000 FQDN were collateral damaged by Piracy Shield. Among all these FQDNs, 2,000 were responding to HTTP and HTTPS requests. And we went manually on that and we classified them, finding that 510 were non-streaming related website and 617 were streaming related website. And the interesting part is that 131 blocked IP addresses were responsible for 508 cases of collateral blocking. And most legitimate affected websites were in French, Spanish, German, and actually 9 in Italian. Leading also to national damage. One notable case involved 19 Albanian websites were hosted on a single IPs, and these websites are still unreachable from Italy nowadays. We also look at collateral damage, so sites that have been affected in the past, and we also found cases basically of 600 non-streaming related websites that were affected in the past. Another interesting case was basically the case of we found an IP address belonging to Halsner that was at a certain point in time rented by a Portuguese hosting company that migrated basically the name server and mail server to this VPS IP. And this actually ended up disrupting the operation of 325 domains. 169 of these relies on this IP also for email and web hosting. And the interesting part is that we reached the company, and the company was completely unaware of the block. They were only realizing that they lose connectivity, email connectivity to Italian customers. They were not able to send invoices to Italian customers. So they went to Halsoner, they requested just a new IP, but they were completely unaware that their operation were disrupted by the collateral damage of Piracy Shield. And the third kind of collateral damage is when being in the platform, there is also a lot of IPs that are Anycast. We found 167 Anycast IPs that were blocked. And Anycast can be used also as an anti-DDoS mechanism, where basically the server may migrate to Anycast infrastructure only for a small period of time. And basically what happened is that these majors, when your website is under attack, they may migrate to this IP address, and at the end of the day, you may notice that your website is unreachable from Italy. We also found a very interesting case of collateral damage that was basically involving an Anycast Google IP, and I connected to the website. I connected to the website from the Netherlands, and I got this page back that for one of you, this is in Italian, but this is basically the web page of blocking of Piracy Shield that was used by Telecom Italia. So the Piracy Shield may manage to block himself, basically. So we also looked to the fact that streamer may evade blocking. So if you have like an FQDN that is blocked and related IP that is blocked, can the streamer basically migrate to IPv6? Because IPv6 is basically not blocked at all by the platform. It's supported by the platform, but they basically don't care about IPv6. And interesting enough, 1,500 FQDN started to serve over IPv6, and 5,000 FQDN adopted at least a new IP, of which only 1,200 were blocked afterwards. And this pattern basically suggests that illegal streamers are ahead of the platform and manage to evade basically this blocking mechanism. So to wrap up a bit this presentation, what we really think is that Agicom, Italian policymakers, and in general, all the policymakers that are considering this kind of mechanism need to reassess this kind of blocking framework. Piracy Shield is currently causing collateral damage to benign activities. IP-level block is indiscriminate and must be avoided by all chance. And it can also have consequences for national security because, at the end of the day, there is a platform in Italy that allows someone to block a resource nationwide. And this platform can easily end up in the wrong hands, if you think about. And also, if you want to use FQDN blocking, streaming events are very time bounded, so you can use that for a very tight time window. And in general, also the list of blocked IPs and blocked FQDN should be public and should be immediately visible to third party for vetting. And in general, operators should also be informed about this blocking because they can do something about it and they can complain about. A lot of the streaming is in the EU, so can we do something better without harming the internet? And with this, thanks a lot, and I hope you have a question for me.
All right, thank you so much. We have 3 minutes, so let's get some quick questions, or particularly if there's any clarifying things or things that you'd like to follow up on. Dan.
Hi, Dan Sexton, IWF. Do you have any thoughts on how Italy should fight privacy without harming the internet as an alternative to this?
So there is a couple, especially for football piracy, there is a couple of elements that makes this fight a bit more easy. To serve a content that the user will like, so that the user will have a good experience, you need to have the server in Europe. That means because you want to have a low latency, you need to have bare metal hosting, and you need probably to host somewhere where you can bring your own prefix or lease your own prefix. This narrows a lot the list of providers you can use. And if you are within the border of the European Union, you can pursue legal action to basically go against these illegal streamer, start to follow the money, because most of these services are actually paid. So people pay the illegal streaming to watch football. So they pay like a monthly quota. So you can follow the money, identify the source of the streaming, and then follow the money of the client, and then catch the client, basically, without having to deal at all with internet, basically.
Yeah, it is a tricky problem. I'd certainly like to see more research in that area, actually, what we can do to introduce a bit more friction and disruption for those that would use the internet for criminal purposes without the collateral damage. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Hi, Andrew Campling. Thanks for the presentation, Raphael. Really interesting as always. A couple of comments. I suppose the first couple are really, we shouldn't be surprised that governments make bad laws. I think we can safely say that does predate the internet by probably quite a few centuries and is unlikely to change. We probably also shouldn't be surprised to learn that governments expect or want tech companies to comply with their legislation, even if it's bad. That's life. We probably ought to remember that there are proven links between at least some of these piracy sites and organized crime. And that's maybe part of the motivation behind these laws, that a lot of these subscriptions are directly sending funds to organized crime, and that's an enormous problem. And just really a thought, as much as a question, some of the collateral damage that you rightly identified around shared IP addresses, etc., arguably that's due to design decisions or allocation decisions made by the CDN operators. So perhaps part of the question should be thrown at them in terms of how can they minimize the collateral damage if they're hosting some of these piracy sites, as a thought.
I don't know, I don't think we have time for the full discussion, but it's a good one. Let's follow up, email, chat, etc. Julia, very quickly.
Very quickly, the piracy shield is deeply disliked by Italian providers, like they've voiced that disliking in all the venues they go to because of the implementation burden, but also because their users in the end are affected. They are the ones who get complaints. And I myself represent small providers. And we wish there was a way for us to have a technical defense to say, hey, we would really like to apply this thing, but we can't, because if we do this, there's this, and consequences, or the service can't work. Instead, the kind of consumer ISP network topology has been the same for the last 30 years, and we didn't really invest to improve that status. And so now implementing this is extremely easy because you just, block where you can block. And I wish there was more exploring for protocol work where we could actually have defenses, where we could say, this is encrypted or this can't happen. Instead, this has been quite stagnant, I think, for the last decades. And so here we are.
All right. Great. With that, that's our session. Thank you again, Raphael. Really appreciate you calling in, sharing this. I think we have a lot to continue to think about and discuss, and it's always great to have these very real-world examples of what's going on to consider. All right. Thank you all again, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
I was going to say that word.